Fes el Bali is the oldest walled part of Fez, Morocco. Fes el Bali was founded as the capital of the Idrisid dynasty between 789 and 808 AD. UNESCO listed Fes el Bali, along with Fes Jdid, as a World Heritage Site in 1981 under the name Medina of Fez. The World Heritage Site includes Fes el Bali's urban fabric and walls as well as a buffer zone outside of the walls that is intended to preserve the visual integrity of the location. Fes el Bali is, along with Fes Jdid and the French-created Ville Nouvelle or New Town, one of the three main districts in Fez. History is the capital for his newly acquired empire. Idris ibn Abdallah chose to build a new town on the right bank of the Fez River in AD 789. Many of the first inhabitants were refugees fleeing from an uprising in Córdoba. However, in 809 his son, Idris II, decided to found a capital of his own on the opposite bank of the Fez River. Even though they were only separated by a relatively small river, the cities developed separately and became two individual cities until they were unified in the 11th century by the Almoravids. There were many refugees who decided to settle in the new city this time too. However, this time they fled from an uprising in Kairouan. The University of Al-Qarawiyyin is recorded by traditional sources as having been founded by one of these refugees, Fatima al-Furi, in 859. UNESCO and Guinness World Records consider it the oldest continuously operating university in the world. The Al-Andalusian Mosque, on the opposite shore of the river, is likewise traditionally believed to have been founded by her sister in the same year. Under the Almoravids, Fez lost its status as a capital, which was moved to the newly created Marrakech. During Almohad rule, Fez was a thriving merchant city, even though it was not a capital. It even became the largest city in the world during that time, with approximately 200,000 people living there. After defeating the Almohads in Morocco, the Marinids moved the capital from Marrakech back to Fez. This marked the beginning of the greatest period of the history for Fes. When the Marinids moved the capital to Fez in 1276, they started building a new town outside the old city walls. At first it was called Medinat al-Bayda, but it quickly became known as Fes el Jdid, while the old city became known as Fes el Bali. 62 The Marinids built the first true madrasas in Morocco, which include many of the city's most notable architectural monuments such as the Bou Anania Madrasa, the Al-Ataran Madrasa, and the Sarij Madrasa. The Saadian dynasty, who used Marrakech again as their capital, did not lavish much attention on Fez, with the exception of the ornate ablutions pavilions added to the Kairouan Mosque's courtyard during their time. They built a number of new forts and bastions around the city which appear to have been aimed at keeping control over the local population. They were mostly located on higher ground overlooking Fes el Bali, from which they would have been easily able to bombard the city with cannons. These include the Kasbah Tamdert, just inside the city walls near Bab Eftu, and the forts of Borj Nord on the hills to the north, Borj Sud on the hills to the south, and the Borj Sheikh Ahmed to the west, at a point in Fes el Jdid's walls that was closest to Fes el Bali. These were built in the late 16th century, mostly by Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur. It was only when the founder of the Alawite dynasty, Moulay Rashid, took Fez in 1666 that the city saw a revival again, albeit briefly. He built the Kasbah Shararda to the northwest of Fes el Jdid to house a large part of his tribal troops. He also restored or rebuilt what became known as the Kasbah an-Nur, which became the living quarters of his followers from the Tafilalt region. For this reason, the Kasbah was also known as the Kasbah Falala. Moulay Ismail, his successor, chose nearby Meknès as his capital instead, but he did restore or rebuild some major monuments in Fes el Bali, such as the Zawiya of Moulay Idris II. While the succession conflicts between Moulay Ismail's sons were another low point in the city's history, the city's fortunes rose more definitively after 1757 with the reign of Moulay Muhammad ibn Abdallah and under his successors. The last major change to Fez's topography before the 20th century was made during the reign of Moulay Hassan I, who finally connected Fes el Jdid and Fes el Bali by building a walled corridor between them. Within this new corridor, between the two cities, were built new gardens and summer palaces used by the royals and the capital's high society, such as the Jainan Sabil Gardens and the Dar Batha Palace. In 1912 French colonial rule was instituted over Morocco following the Treaty of Fes. Fez ceased to be the center of power in Morocco as the capital was moved to Rabat, which remained the capital even after independence in 1956. Starting under French Resident General Hubert Lyautey, one important policy with long-term consequences was the decision to largely forego redevelopment of existing historic walled cities in Morocco and to intentionally preserve them as sites of historic heritage, still known today as Medinas. Instead, the French administration built new modern cities just outside the old cities, where European settlers largely resided with modern Western-style amenities. The existence today of a Ville Nouvelle alongside a historic Medina of Fez was thus a consequence of this early colonial decision-making and had a wider impact on the entire city's development. While new colonial policies preserved historic monuments, it also had other consequences in the long term by stalling urban development in these heritage areas. Wealthy and bourgeois Moroccans started moving into the more modern Ville Nouvelles during the interwar period. By contrast, the old city of Fez was increasingly settled by poorer rural migrants from the countryside. 26 Today Fes el Bali in the larger historic Medina is a major tourism destination due to its historical heritage. In recent years efforts have been underway to restore and rehabilitate its historic fabric, ranging from restorations of individual monuments to attempts to rehabilitate the Fez River. Geography and layout. Urban structure. The city is located along both sides of the Fez River. Although parts of the wall and some of its historic gates have disappeared, Fes el Bali is still mostly enclosed by a long and winding circuit of defensive walls. These were entered via a number of gates, the most important of which were Bab Marouk, Bab Guisa, and Bab Ftu. At the western end of the city were two historic kasbahs attached to the city. The Kasbah in Noor, which still exists today on the northern side of Place Bou Jelaud, and the Kasbah Bou Jelaud, whose walls have since disappeared but which stood directly southwest of the current Bab Bou Jelaud gate. The Kasbah Bou Jelaud was historically the governor's residence and the seat of government control. The Almohad-built Bou Jelaud Mosque still stands there today, one of the only remnants of the original enclosure. As in many medieval Islamic cities, the main souk streets of the city typically run from the city's main gates to the area of the city's main mosque. In this case, the Karawayan and, to a lesser extent, the Zawiya of Moulay Idris II and the Mosque of the Andalusians. These mosques, in turn, are located inside or near the city's main commercial and economic zones. The souk streets themselves constitute the main commercial axes of the city and are home to most of its funduks. As a result, merchants and foreign visitors rarely had need to wander outside these areas, and most of the streets branching off them lead only to local residential lanes, many of them leading to dead ends. Even today, tourists are generally found only on these main commercial thoroughfares. The city's most important monuments and institutions are also located on or near its main souk streets. Accordingly, the Medina has a cohesive and hierarchical urban structure that can be distinguished on two levels. At a local level, individual neighborhoods and districts are specialized for residential, commercial, and industrial purposes. On a wider level, the city is organized in relation to major points of importance such as gates and main mosques. At this wider level, there are roughly four main centers of urban activity and organization. One around the Karawiyan Mosque, one around the Mosque of the Andalusians, another around the Bou Anania Madrasa Mosque, and the historically separate agglomeration of Fes Jdid. Fes el Bali is also notable for being a large car-free urban area, due to the well-preserved urban fabric of traditional narrow streets and alleys unsuitable for cars. Only one major road penetrates the Medina from the south, following the course of the river, and reaching Place Arkif near the center of the city, which allows access for public transportation and emergency vehicles. Districts and neighborhoods. The city is broadly divided between two quarters, on opposite shores of the Fez River: the Karawayan quarter or Adwat al-Karawayan and the Andalusian quarter or Adwat al-Andalus. These are further divided into smaller historic neighborhoods or districts. In the early 20th century, French historian Roger Letourneau recorded that the city was divided administratively into the 18 neighborhoods listed below. Letourneau noted that the Salwa el-Anfez, a 14th-century chronicle, lists a very similar division of neighborhoods, even if the borders and names have changed slightly. The name, Adwat on its own, is also used in some sources to refer to the whole eastern shore of the city. 118 to 120 Karawayan quarter, at Tala el Uyan el Kalklian Ras Jainan el Gurnez el Ketanan Swikat ben Safi esh Shrablian Skak Rahman Funduk el Yehudi el Blida es Saga Andalusian quarter, el Mokfias Sidi el Awad and el Koaz el Kedan el Jizira el Fakiran Ued Easy Zitoun. Both the El Fakiran and Ued Easy Zitoun areas, which occupy the entire eastern region of the Andalusian quarter beyond the Andalusian Mosque, were largely empty of major constructions prior to the 20th century, with the exception of a few religious structures and funduks. These districts only filled up with residential structures during the French protectorate period in the 20th century. The Uyan District, which covered a very large area in the southeastern region of the Karawayan quarter, was historically occupied by gardens and rich estates used by the city's wealthy and bourgeois classes. This is attested by the number of historic mansions still existing in this area, such as the Dar Mokri and the Dar Glawi. The name Uyan, the sources, referred to the presence of many water streams and sources which crossed the district and provided water for its gardens. The name Funduk el Yehudi reflects the fact that, before the creation of the Mellah in Fes Jdid, the Jewish community had been concentrated in this neighborhood since the time of Idris II. The city's original Jewish cemetery was also located near here, just outside the nearby gate of Bab Guisa. Threats and conservation. According to the UNESCO, there are two main threats to this World Heritage Site. an ever-increasing population in an already dangerously overpopulated area and the uncontrolled urban development which is a result of that. The deterioration of the buildings because of the vulnerability of the site. The government has adopted a special plan to care for this World Heritage Site and every building and monument it contains. The aim is to prevent houses from collapsing, increase sustainable tourism and to safeguard everything. Since 1989 a quasi-governmental agency known as Fes has been charged with restoring much of the Medina and safeguarding its heritage. In recent years efforts have been underway to restore more of the old Medina, ranging from the restoration of dozens of individual monuments to attempts to rehabilitate the Fez River. Place Lala Yeduna at the heart of the Medina has been recently undergoing reconstruction and preservation measures following a design competition sponsored by the Millennium Challenge Corporation and the government of the Morocco. The construction projects scheduled for completion in 2016 encompass historic preservation of particular buildings, construction of new buildings that fit into the existing urban fabric and regeneration of the riverfront. The intention is to not only preserve the quality and characteristics of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, but to encourage the development of the area as a sustainable, mixed-use area for artisanal industries and local residents. Landmarks. The following are some of the major historic monuments and landmarks in Fes el Bali mosques and Zawiyas Al-Qarawiyyan Mosque, University Mosque of the Andalusian, Zawiya of Moulay Idris II, Zawiya of Sidi Ahmed Al-Tijani, Kribliyini Mosque, Bab Guisa Mosque, Bo Jelaud Mosque, Arkif Mosque, Abu al-Hassan Mosque, Dewan Mosque, Madrasas Bo Anania Madrasa, Madrasa al-Atarine Madrasa as Saraj Madrasa, Cheratin Madrasa as Seferin Mezbahaya Madrasa. Palaces and historic houses: Dar Batha, Dar Nabi, Dar Mokri, Dar Glawi, Dar Jamai, Dar Adil, Funduks, Funduk al-Najaran, Funduk Staonayan, Funduk Shamayin, Funduk Saga, Funduk Ketanan, Tanneries Shwara, Tannery Sidi Musa, Tannery Gates and Fortifications. Main article: Fortifications of Fez. Historic city walls: Bab Bo Jelaud, Bab Maruk, Bab F2, Bab Guisa, Borj Nord, Borj Sud Kasba and Nur and Bab Chorfa. Other historic landmarks: Marinid tombs, Bab F2 Cemetery, Tala'a Kebira, Kisari at Al-Kifa, Dar al-Maganya.